y'all, Happy New Year! I am Hope here at Crafty Hope, and I welcome you to my channel and this first video of the new year. Let me tell you what I'm doing here. It is Junk Journal January. This is a series that's been going on for several years. They also do it in July as well. I just recently found it and decided to play along this year. I really want to try to do some daily art journaling, and I thought that this prompted challenge would be a great way to start out with it. If you want to learn more about it, head over to Meg Journals. I will put a link to her below and her introduction videos and where you can find the prompts and all of that. And it is done in conjunction with Get Messy. Now, I am not a member of Get Messy, but it looks like a really awesome community if you're looking for something like that too. So this is the second challenge for that. I will not be sharing every single junk journal page I'm doing, but I went ahead and turned the camera on for this one and thought I would, share with you what I did. You can see I started in first off, I did not create a journal for the junk journal series. Instead, I decided to work through some of the 10 in progress junk journals I have. This one in particular had the least amount of pages left to complete, so I'm starting with it. And you can see this page had a bunch of sprays on it. I believe it is on a piece of it's like newsprint from a reproduction Sears and Roebuck catalog, and it had a bunch of sprays. It looks like maybe I was spraying the whatchamacallit, the tester things I put on top of my sprays. So possibly that, I'm not positive, but I put down just a little bit of collage and then some gesso. Now I'll admit this is much more gesso than I had intended to put down, but I am gonna roll with it. So once I get that kind of spread everywhere, I will dry this, I believe, or do I may not. I will let you know that the prompt for this day, again, was day 2. The prompt was quote. So I went and spent a little bit of time looking for a quote that kind of went along with my word of the year, which I have chosen is action. Now, I might change my mind in a couple days and decide that that is not the word I want, but at the moment, that is the one I'm rolling with. So I looked up quotes about action and found this one that says, to get what we've never had, we must do what we've never done. And that's from Juan Casimiro. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but he's a CEO and founder of some kind of youth program that assists the youth in becoming leaders, I think. I did look him up because, I didn't know who he was. So I typed that quote out on a piece of scrap deli paper that was sitting on my desk and just on my typewriter. And then you can see I grabbed this piece of rust dyed fabric. I believe that is some cheap fabric. It's like a flour sack towel from the Dollar Tree is what I think that fabric is, and it dyed so beautifully. So I am using it, and you can see I'm trying to frame up that phrase. So I have picked out what portion of the fabric I wanted and did like a plus sign on it and then tore it open around the phrase. And then to frame it up a little bit more, I have grabbed my Dollar Tree rollerball pen that I love and done some really messy circling around it, and this does react somewhat to water, so what I'm going to grab is a wet paintbrush and just wet a little bit of it. I'm trying not to obscure the whole thing. I think I'll even bring in that pen again to bring some of the lines back because they got too messy. Now, like I said, I chose the quote I found online, this whole list. I can't even remember how many. It was like 40 something quotes on action. And I'm going to tell you, just to give you some, I wrote down like 13, 14 of them, something like that. And to give you some inspiration, I will probably read some of these here in a minute while we get to some of the fussier parts of this journal page. Now, I wasn't feeling the stark white I had on there, so I grabbed some Titan Buff I think it's supposed to be fluid acrylic from Golden, but it's something I picked up at a garage sale and it's not super fluid. So, yeah. I scraped that a little bit of couple of places on there, and then before it has dried, I grabbed, this is walnut stain distress oxide spray, and I grabbed it, you can see, sprayed it in a couple places, added a little bit of water, and y'all, this is going to weirdly come out kind of purple, and I don't know how that happened, but okay, I'm gonna roll with it. There was a little bit of purple spray in the background there that was still showing before I collaged and added gesso, but for some reason this walnut stain turns, yeah, you see that purpley color? It's odd, but I'm rolling with it. All right, so I decided to go ahead, and what I really wanted to do was add a bunch of texture onto this and stick down the parts I had like tore and cut up. So first thing I'm going to do is grab my Oohoo glue stick to tack down that bit of rusty fabric over my quote, just like that, and I want to frame it up with that rusty fabric. So first thing I'm going to do, I keep saying first thing, is not the first thing. The next thing I do is tear off that paper because I don't need all that extra paper now that I've got the quote tacked. Now what I like about this in general is I have this piece here that I am going to work with before I put it on my page. So I'm going to do several things to it before I finally stick it down to my page. All right, so I'm looking at that, trying to decide if I like it. There's a lot of futzing. Some of it I have cut out of this video so that y'all don't have to see it, little bits of things. But what I really wanted to do was use some thread to stitch back those parts that were kind of overhanging and some of those sharp edges and all of that. So I'm using all 6 strands of it's almost a Titan Buff color of embroidery floss, and I've sped this up a bit more, and just stitching down those pieces, turning corners in, taking away the sharp points, and just doing it simple little, almost seed stitches, maybe a little bit bigger. Now, while I'm letting you watch this, I'm going to tell you some of the other quotes I found that really appealed to me that went with that action prompt. So the first one is, "There is no greater harm than that of time wasted," and that's from Michelangelo. George Elliott said, "It is never too late to be who you might have been." Ooh, should I say that again? It is never too late to be who you might have been. Steve Jobs said, "The greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing." Teddy Roosevelt said, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." And a similar quote to that is from Arthur Ashe, and he said, "To achieve greatness, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can." Bob Proctor, I don't know who that is, said, "The biggest gap in your life is that between what you know and what you do." Shakespeare wrote that things won are done, joy's soul lies in the doing. All right, so that was my first page of them. Then I've got from Maria Robinson, somebody else, again, I don't know. She said, "Nobody can go back and start a new beginning, but anyone can start today and make a new ending." Richard Evans said, "The undertaking of a new action brings new strength." Lord Tennyson, Alfred Lord Tennyson said, "I must lose myself in action, lest I wither in despair." How good is that? W. Clement Stone said, "So many fail because they don't get started." Pablo Picasso said, and this is one I almost used instead of the one I chose, said, "Action is the foundational key to all success." And then Friedrich Schiller said, "Lose not yourself in a far off time. Seize the moment that is thine." So I will try to include those below for you if I can, if any of those inspire you. And if I forget to put them and you would like me to write those out somewhere, let me know. I just thought those were, and I've also got the one that I used as well. So I will try to put some of those below, at least the ones that really spoke to me. But there, like I said, I just did a quick search online for action quotes and found this really long list. and decided, to write them all down and then figure out which one was my favorite. And you can see which one was my favorite. Now, I will also tell you that in my action, part of my action word of the year is for me I get ideas all the time, things I want to do, things I see, and I don't do them. I don't know. I want to do a little bit better job of acting on the inspiration that comes to me and the inspiration that is there at hand rather than storing it away for another day, because that other day may not come. So that's my idea of my action word of the year. Okay, so I have finally finished stitching up this little frame. And again, y'all, this was just some deli paper and some rust-dyed fabric and thread. So, I do want to maybe try playing with some other things, and you'll see here in a minute that I absolutely do that. Once I have done my stitching tied off the back, I'm going to look at this for a little while. And yeah, I'm looking around at things, thinking on what I want to do and what I really wanted to do. Oh, first off, I decided that I needed something dark on here, that this was feeling far too light. So I wet a Stabilo all pencil and I'm just flicking a little bit of it onto the page, tiny, tiny bit, trying to keep, you see that right where I want to put my words, I kind of want to keep that fairly light there so you can continue to see the typing on my page. All right, so from there, I'm thinking, yeah, this is some of the futzing I was talking about. Right, I decided I wanted to add some buttons to that frame. I have piles and piles and piles, well, more like jars and jars and jars of buttons. In fact, if you go to my Instagram, you see the same day I made this, I also made a necklace out of buttons. So they are definitely something I really enjoy and want to include in my art more often. So this is it. Now, some of these came straight out of button jars and tins and things like that. And I don't know if you know, but not back in the old days, but when people, before they threw away clothes in order to not seem wasteful, of course, they made quilts out of those clothes. They didn't throw them away. But they'd cut the buttons off, and often the thread and fabric that were on the buttons are still in the jars, or still in those tins, so they still have a bit of that history attached to them, but it makes them a little difficult to sew on. So 2 of those little buttons still had the thread on them, so I had to cut that history off, unfortunately. So if I ever glue buttons down, I will often keep some of that thread on there. I don't know what it is. It's kind of gross, but it's yeah, I like it. But I'm going to use that same kind of off-whitey thread that I was using, what's left on my needle, and go ahead and just tack these buttons down with it. I was having a hard time finding the holes because I've got all those layers on there, and I found that where I glued, in fact, was really hard to get through. I think I was using a very dull needle, so I think I need to probably switch out my needles and make sure that they are nice and sharp. So this one just was not wanting to get through some of the fabric. But I'm doing some really basic stitches on this. This is not something that's going to be handled very often. It's just going to be in my journal, so it doesn't have to be over the top stitched down secure like you would on your clothing. All right, so there's 2 of them, and then I'm adding that third, and you could see that I had auditioned a 4th button in the upper right corner, but when I looked at that, I realized I didn't really care for that 4th button. I like my, 3s, my odd numbers. All right, so once I get that one down, again, I'm going to tie this off on the back, and I'm just trying to keep the thread from showing in the front through that deli paper. So when I was making the frame even, I was making sure that my stitches kind of ran around the edges and didn't crisscross around the back. All right, see, and those buttons kind of give that a little bit of weight to it. But the page still felt very plain, and I was like, okay, I need to add something else, anything else. And a mushroom. I have I'm trying to use the things I have. I have so many beautiful collections of things, but I tend to hoard them. So I want to take action and use these things. So I've got this pack of Tim Holtz. Oh, it's an ephemera set of some kind, maybe botanicals. I will try to link it if I can remember. And pulled out, finally flipped through it, found this pretty little mushroom I was going to use. I saw I was going to try to add wings, but just it didn't work. But this mushroom I thought was perfect. It had some good height without being overbearing, I guess, on the page. So that's what I'm going to use. But first, I want to do something, again, use some of the stuff that I've been hoarding in my stash. And I took that same piece of deli paper, typed another word on it, and I am testing it out with these little beeswax pellets. I'm trying to see if I can get my heat tool to melt them. So they blew away at first. So what I decided to do was heat up the deli paper first and then stick. That heat tool is not on at the moment. Okay, so I have stuck it into the hot paper so that it sticks down, and then I am heating the page again to melt those beeswax pellets. So this is kind of like an encaustic effect without like the resin. I do have encaustic medium too, but I feel like that needs to be melted in a more proper way. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing over here, and I'm heating up that deli paper page, and y'all, those buttons got really hot. You'll see in a little while I'm touching them, so that mother of pearl holds some heat. All right, once I get a few pieces of those beeswax pellets stuck down, I'm going to heat that up, and so that it melts down and kind of coats my phrase. I just wanted something a little different, kind of to make it a little bit milkier, and I don't know, I just wanted to see what happened. It was an experiment. I wanted to act on the instinct. And I don't know if you can see my rusty fabric kind of got dark too, so I don't know if it burned there or if some of the beeswax got on it and darkened it in some way. It was very odd, like gave it kind of a wet feel. You know how fabric gets darker when it gets wet. So yeah, it just seemed odd that it seemed to get a little bit darker. I could be mistaken. I was watching the beeswax and not the fabric. All right, this needed a bit more texture in the background, so I used this stamp. It is one of the few stamps besides my hand-carved ones that I keep nearby all the time, and it is the Tim Holtz Ledger's script stamped, and I used some StazOn, and I'm lightly just putting it on the page. You can see I just used a piece of scrap paper to block off where my quote is going so that there's nothing in the background of it that might be too busy, I suppose. All right, so I'm going to lay everything out, look at it another time, and hopefully finally start gluing some stuff down here. I'm going to use Fabri-Tac on the back, and I'm just putting it around behind the frame, because I don't know what'll happen if I put it behind the words. So I'm putting it on the frame, making sure I coat also some of the fabric that's exposed so that everything is sticking to the page, not just the thread or not just the paper. I want, fabric sticking. I want all of it sticking down. And then since the Fabri-Tac is out, I'm going to go ahead and put it also on my mushroom, just because these ephemera pieces are a little dark. Now, once I realized I didn't ink the edges of that, so I'm going to quickly, while that Fabri-Tac is still wet, ink as much as I can of this mushroom. I do wish I'd thought about it beforehand. I would have used another tool, maybe a smaller tool, to get more of that ink on there, but it's fine. I did it real fast. And then I'll use my black Stabilo all again to go around the mushroom. I did get a little bit on the mushroom, so I quickly wiped it off with some water. And I'm also putting a couple lines out near the bottom so it looks like the line of the ground, so it kind of anchors the mushroom a little bit more. And then using that same wet paintbrush, I will activate the Stabilo all and give it some life. And I'm trying to think what comes next. Y'all, I'm sorry this is so long, but it was really I don't want these junk journal Januaries to be super long, but currently it's fueling my soul and fueling my creativity each day, and that's what I want. So I'm going with it. As long as I'm feeling inspired to create it, I'm letting it. And then I am inking up the edges of the page just because it felt like it needed a little bit of framing up. And that may be it. I'm trying to see. I hope you find some inspiration in this and in your word of the year. Oh, I do have a couple more things. What I decided is I needed some gold on here, so I will get my Liquitex acrylic ink in gold and a fan brush and splatter a little bit of gold on there and then dry it. So that will be it for this page. Is all the things I like. It is dark and grungy. It has mushrooms and buttons and beeswax, and I got to play. So I hope you are inspired to go and play with your materials. Use what you have, take some action, and let me know if you have any questions at all. Enjoy 2024 as you can, doing what you like to do and what you feel in your heart you need to do. All right, guys, I will see y'all later. Thanks for watching. Bye.